Alexander. The foods that we eat tell the stories of our lives. So join me today as we dish about the dish. So why chocolate chip cookies? Well, as a child, probably made up the majority of your diet. It was also probably one of the first things you learned how to bake. I know I did with my grandmother. So I thought, hey, let's start you off with chocolate chip cookies. How I work chocolate chip cookies into one of my books is in the Sprawling a Ranch series. I'd already established that my first heroine, Greta, was an amazing cook. Second heroine, Gabriella, was all about Tex-Mex and Mexican cuisines. Faith, fortunately, couldn't cook worth a darn. She burnt the toast every time. But she could make an amazing chocolate chip cookie. Because even though she lost her mother at a young age, she learned at the hand of a family friend how to make chocolate chip cookies step by step. So I'm going to share this recipe with you today. So first we start off with our mise en place. Sounds fancy? It's not really. It just means to make ready. Vitally important, especially if you're going to be baking. So we're going to start with our ingredients. We have our 2 cups of butter, 4 ounces each of brown sugar and granulated sugar, 2 ounces of molasses, our 2 eggs, vanilla, salt, baking soda, and our flour. And then of course our chocolate chips for our chocolate chip cookies. So first thing I'm going to do is sift my dry ingredients, which is my flours and my baking soda and my salt. This is when mise en place becomes vitally important because my mother somehow always managed to forget either the salt or the baking soda in her chocolate chip cookies. Now, why do we sift? Well, it's to aerate the flour, make it nice and fluffy if we don't get it all over the counter. And it also helps to get out of any foreign substance that may have made the trip in our flours. Make sure we get all the ingredients. Now you will see here that I do have a food scale. If you're baking at home, you don't need a food scale. You can totally measure this out. But if you're doing this for like professional purposes, if you're going to be selling your products as a business, you most definitely want a scale. Because baking is a science. Any ingredient in the wrong ratios will totally ruin your product. It also helps confirm that you will have a consistent product each and every time. So I've made my holy mess and we're going to start mixing. Right, so in my old and trusty KitchenAid, you can see this has been with me for a very long time. We're going to add our room temperature butter. Yes, it's been at room temperature. Why? It's so that all of our ingredients meld together. I'm putting in my sugars and my sugar, which is also molasses. At this stage, you can also add your extracts because it won't hurt your recipe one bit. Second speed, with a paddle. So let's say you have found a list of ingredients, but it doesn't tell you how to put them together. Well, one trick is if your recipe is listed in the order of fats in the form of butter or oil, plus sugar, followed by eggs, followed by your dry ingredients, or a dry and wet ingredient, you're going to do what's called the creaming method. Butters and sugars at second or low speed until combined, eggs, flours. If you're making a cake, you might have milk or buttermilk or water that you'll put in there. That's the creaming method. So even though you don't have the instructions, you know just by the way they've listed those ingredients, that's how they're intending you put those ingredients together. Okay, so I'm going to make sure this is well combined. Looks like it can go a little bit longer. Now we're going to add our eggs one at a time. I know, I cracked it on the corner. That's okay. Excellent. We're gonna make sure we have no big clumps of butter waiting off to the side. And now we're going to add our dry ingredients a third at a time. In case we didn't catch that last time, we're going to add our dry ingredients a third at a time. Why just a little bit at a time? Well, it's because you might have heard flours have a protein in it called gluten. Not dietary gluten, just meaning strength. And if you overwork it, you'll get tough, chewy, and not a good way baked goods. So if we do it just a bit at a time, one, we're going to make sure it's incorporated, and two, we're going to make sure we're not overworking our dough. And then don't forget slow speed, so we don't have poofs of flour all over the place. Now if I was making a cake and I had like a buttermilk ingredient, I would actually alternate flour, buttermilk, flour, buttermilk 5 or 6 times. Excellent. And we want it just combined, not overworked. Lovely, lovely dough. Goodness. Could you totally make these by hand? Yes. Yes, you can. You're gonna have a hell of a bicep workout, but a hell of a bicep workout. But you can totally add the flour by hand. Do the butter and sugar with the beater. In fact, that's how my mom used to make cookies when I was a kid. And then my favorite part was licking off the beater. Now you might have thought me using molasses was an interesting choice. I find that molasses one not only gives it an amazing color, but it also it adds sweetness without adding that sugary taste to it, and what I find is to be a richer cookie. So now we have our cookie base, where we're gonna add our chocolate chips. And the reason I call it a cookie base is because really this is a basic cookie. You can add anything to this dough that you want. Chocolate chips is a favorite. Remember, we're just going to add them just enough to mix, but not overwork. I hope this doesn't climb out the side. But you can add whatever you want. Reese's Pieces, M&Ms, dried cranberries with white chocolate. Although if you're going to do dried cranberries and white chocolate, I would add a teaspoon or 2 of cinnamon just to really bring out the flavor of the white chocolate and your dried fruit. And I know people are worried about dried fruit in their cookies. I enjoy it tremendously. You can also add your oats and your raisins for your cinnamon raisin oatmeal cookies. Again, I find delightful, don't you? Now it's time to scoop our cookies onto the tray. Now these are what's called drop cookies because you drop them on the tray sheet. Pretty easy, eh? Keep my spatula handy. I'm using an ice cream scoop because spoons can be a little tricky, but an ice cream scoop also could be a little tricky. So you remember how I said this was the base for a cookie? Yes, it is. I'm going to do half chocolate chip, and then I have off to the side here some chopped up dried cherries for a chocolate chip cherry cookie. Let me tell you, these are delightful. I know some people do not care for that surprise of dried fruit. I don't care because they're so good. So I know you're probably thinking, these are really close together. Aren't they gonna melt and meld into one big cookie? They would if I was throwing them directly into the oven, but I'm not. I'm actually gonna chill these for about 30 minutes. That's because we have this soft and gooey butter. We wanna give it a chance to solidify again and meld with the rest of the flavors in our cookies. This also gives the chance for the flour to rest, so again, we don't get that tough, wrongly chewy cookie. So once we take them out of the refrigerator, then I will go ahead and give them a bit more of a round shape and separate them back out on the cookie sheet for better baking. So we'll see in 30 minutes. So we've taken our cookies out of the refrigerator and I am just shaping them up so they're a little bit more round, a little bit spaced out on our cookie sheet. So we're going to spread these out so they have a little bit more space between them. And these ones might come together, but that's okay. Depending on how big your scoop is or how big your mounds are, you could probably get more cookies out of this, but these are gonna make a good size cookie. So we're gonna put them in our 350-degree oven. And then the big question is, how long do you bake them for? And that is until they are done. You want them to be golden, together, delicious looking. Everybody's oven temperature is different. So that's why I can't say cook them for 10 minutes and you're done, because they may take 12 and I might take 15. So I'm gonna actually time it for 10 now, take a look at them, and if they're not done, I'm gonna keep them in there to go until they're finished. So here we are with our finished cookies. These took about 15 minutes in the oven and they look so good and so delicious. Now the trick with baked goods that a lot of people kind of miss is that they immediately take it out of the oven, they wait until it's not gonna burn their flesh, and then they start eating it. But that's not when the cookie tastes its best. You wanna let them cool a bit until they're almost room temperature. That gives time for your vanilla and your sugar and your butter to kind of come back together, because it's a little melty right now, and give it its optimum flavor. So if you want to warm up your cookies later, then warm up your cookies later. But before you take that first bite, let them cool significantly to get the best flavor out of your cookies. So here we have our completed ooey gooey, chocolatey, cherry, awesome deliciousness. So thank you so much for joining us today making these chocolate chip cookies. If you liked the video, please hit subscribe, the little like button, all those bells and whistles down there that help us out with the channel, and we hope to see you again sometime soon. Till next time, y'all.